Today I'm going to give you my 6 pro tips on how to do this $75 centerpiece for about $30. But let's see if it's worth all the work and effort. Hi, welcome to another video. For those of you who are brave enough to attempt to do your own wedding centerpieces, I have 6 pro tips you really have to listen to help you manage this whole process smoothly. We're going to do this nice centerpiece for less than half the price, but it's going to be a lot of effort. So let's get started. So here are my 6 pro tips on how to successfully do your own centerpieces for your wedding, or if you're just doing a large party, fundraiser, shower, anniversary party, whatever large scale project you want to take on yourself. Now, the design tips I'm going to give you today don't just encompass the design aspect, but all the practical aspects of doing multiple centerpieces. Tip number 1, choose an appropriate container. Well, what do I mean by appropriate? Now, appropriate container is a container that will be transportable. You want to make sure that once you've done your centerpieces, you can deliver it to the venue and they're not going to fall over in the car during delivery. And even more importantly, they're not going to fall over on the table if you're doing an outdoor event. So absolutely no tall centerpieces or tall, slender vases for outdoor events. And our bread and butter containers that we use for my business for low centerpieces are either these 5-inch cubes or these 5 or 6-inch diameter cylinder vases. These are nice, heavy bottom glass containers that are easy to arrange in, very neutral, modern, and sleek looking, and will not fall over. Okay? And you need to pick the right size container. What do I mean by right size? Now, this is about an appropriate medium size centerpiece container. Just remember that the finished arrangement is going to be about double the size of the diameter of the opening of your container. It's not going to be perfect, but if you want a centerpiece about this big, do not buy a vase this big. Then you're going to have a centerpiece this big. So the container you choose is going to feel a little small to you probably when you look at it, but trust me, you'd rather have a vase that looks a little small than one that looks too big and doesn't look like you have enough flowers in it. Number 2, proper mechanics. I'm going to show you some really great products here, and my go-to floral mechanic, floral foam. Now, I know the floral foam is bad for the environment, all that, but if you are new at this or are trying to, as an amateur, take on a pro project, please just use floral foam, because chicken wire is not as easy to use, stems can move around, and if you need to pull out a stem, you could pull the whole chicken wire out with it. So floral foam is still the easiest mechanic to use. What I have here is a standard brick of Oasis floral foam. You can see it's scored into thirds, and there's also a mark for the halfway mark. This is a knife that I use. They sell foam knives, but any long, straight-edged, serrated knife would do. This is just an old bread knife, and it works great. You could cut your floral foam dry or wet. Now, if I'm doing multiples, I will soak all the floral foam and then cut it after, because it'll just, that powdery stuff will come off a lot less. But if you just need one piece of floral foam, you don't want to soak a whole piece and waste the other parts of it, then I would cut the floral foam first. Now, I've done thousands of centerpieces using these kind of containers, so I know that this cylinder takes about 1/3 piece of floral foam. So I'm going to cut 1/3 piece of floral foam off. And with the Oasis products, you can see that it's solid on all sides except for one, which has little tiny dots. And that perforation is how it will soak up water quicker. And I have here just a big bowl with water with floral preservative in it. And the way you soak floral foam is just to place it in there, let it float, and slowly absorb the water in. Do not force it down with your hand, because what that will do is create dry pockets of foam that are air bubbles or air pockets, and it won't provide water for your arrangement. That's another reason why we use floral foam for centerpieces. We usually fill the container with water up to maybe the 2/3 mark, and we put it away in the fridge. And I don't really refill it on the day of the wedding because I don't want it sloshing around in the van when I'm doing deliveries or sloshing out onto the tablecloths once we place the arrangements. If you have a soaking wet floral foam and about this much water in it, keeping that foam wet, that will keep your flowers fresh. Okay. Now, you definitely don't want your floral foam to show, so I'm going to show you a really wonderful product to use to cover your mechanics. This is faux tea leaf wrap. Tea leaf is a tropical foliage that we use that we can buy at the flower market very inexpensively, and you can use that to line the inside of your vase. Now, for many years I did that, and you always have to cut it to fit and make it look perfect, and it was fine. But a few years ago, there's a wonderful new product from Italy called Aspid. And they came out with all these really great tea leaf mimicking like ribbon-like things. Now there's all sorts of manufacturers of this. When it first came out, it was very expensive. Each roll was like $35. Now they're much less expensive. So this is like a tea leaf or aspidistra. Here's another more solid green tea leaf, but still has like gradations of color, so it looks like a leaf. This one is the red tea leaf. It looks really realistic, actually, when you put it in the vase. And a light colored foliage, like kind of a yellow-green. They even come in gold and silver if you wanted to line your vase with a color. So today we're just going to use a standard green tea leaf. And I'll show you how we do it. What I usually do is I will measure it on the outside, okay? And it just has to overlap just a tiny little bit, not really, and then you can cut it. And because the outside diameter is larger than your inside diameter, you know for sure it'll overlap enough inside. And then you just go ahead and place it inside your vase. And look how nice, it's exactly the right height of our vase. And then you can put your floral foam inside that. You won't see the foam. And once the arrangement's done, it looks like you have a tea leaf wrap inside. It looks really nice. And the ribbon is waterproof, so you don't have to worry about it disintegrating or bleeding in color or anything like that. So our floral foam is soaked enough. It's sunk to the bottom, so I think we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the vase. Okay. Just going to add a little water to the container to keep the foam wet. Okay. Tip number 3, keep your flower choices simple. Simple in color and numbers of flowers, because the more types of flowers you use in an arrangement, the more stem insertions and the more complicated it gets in terms of buying the flowers, because you have to calculate how many stems you need. Plus, it could easily blow your budget if you have too many random, small flowers. That's wonderful to have all these novelty floral materials for one-of-a-kind arrangements like I like to use, but not when you're trying to do 15, 20, 30 arrangements at once. And on that note, do not select materials where you have to have that perfect arching branch or sinuous, cascading line, because you're not going to be able to find 20 of the same exact branch or line to create centerpieces that look the same. So I steer away from that. So those are for one-off arrangements. Now, what I like to do is select some kind of flower that is sort of neutral and will cover your foam. And what better flower than hydrangeas? So hydrangeas are a crutch that I use for flower designs because it's a nice neutral background. It fills everything in really nicely, and there are a lot of colors to choose from. And we buy a lot of white hydrangeas and a lot of pale green ones to keep it neutral. Now this is from my garden, but you can buy white or pale green or blue or lavender hydrangeas pretty easily during the season. And even out of season, the white and green are almost always available because they're imported from South America. These are my Annabelles from my garden, and they're this beautiful pale green that I think is really neutral. So I will stick with only maybe 2, 3 colors for your flowers. Like I consider sort of white and green almost neutrals. And you want to add large flowers like this in odd numbers. Like 3 hydrangeas are plenty. Okay, so we're going to do 3 hydrangeas. One is sort of white, the other are kind of green. And you see how it just kind of covers your foam and it really gives you like that nice clustered centerpiece look. And then I'm going to add some greenery. I have 2 types of greenery. You could certainly just use one type of greenery. I cut some Dusty Miller as well as scented geranium to use in this arrangement. You guys know how much I love my scented geraniums. I think they're just such a charming, beautiful greenery. And you don't need a lot of greenery, just to round out the edges because the foam is almost all covered by your hydrangea. That's the beauty of the hydrangea. Now, there are, of course, a lot more sophisticated styles of centerpieces, more high-end centerpieces you can do. The point of my video today is to show you a really beautiful but basic centerpiece that you can realistically do in multiples for your own event. And the reason you're doing your own flowers is to save some money. So I don't want to get too crazy with the types of materials we're going to use today, okay? You can see those in my other videos when I do a lot of one-of-a-kind things that are kind of crazy. So I'm just adding a little bit of greenery around the edges. I'm going to save a little bit of space for the Dusty Miller. Now, because the Dusty Miller is sort of grayish and has a serrated leaf, it's almost like an accent flower. Or an accent, a floral accent, not necessarily flower. Okay, add in the Dusty Miller. And you can add in a little bit more greenery after you've done the arrangement as well. So I'm kind of adding in the greenery in between where the hydrangeas are just to make this a more rounded arrangement. If that makes sense. Okay. So when I say keep your materials simple, I have chosen one large type flower for kind of filling in, 2 types of greenery. You could definitely just do one. And what I usually do is 1 type of form flower, the big, large focal flower, and 2 accent flowers. And that's it. Keep it simple. So today for the form flower, I have these beautiful garden-style roses called Romantic Antica. This is actually not from my garden. My garden's quite decimated by all the heat we've had the last few weeks in California. But I found these at Trader Joe's, of course, and they're very inexpensive. They're garden roses. I think it's 8 stems for $10. So you're going to add in your form flowers. And as a general rule of thumb, you want to add things in odd numbers. But I have to say, when you have more stems, like if you're adding anything more than 6 stems, you don't have to worry about odd numbers because no one's going to know when you add in 8, 10, 12 stems of something, it's not going to look boxy or too symmetrical or eyeballing. That's the whole reason why we do the odd numbers, so that you don't have like 4 in a quad or 2, one next to each other, or if you do 6, 3 and 3 in a row. That's what we're trying to avoid. So the odd number of flowers is not a hard and fast rule, especially with more stems. You don't have to worry as much about that. Okay. Look at these, they're just amazing. Wow. Now there's a grower in the San Francisco flower market from Petaluma that grows this Romantic Antica rose. I love it because I love these peachy coral colors, and I love this old-fashioned rosette-shaped rose. I'm just stripping off the foliage because it doesn't look that great. And we've got our own greenery in here. See, I've added 6 of the roses, but I'm not adding them symmetrically in. I'm adding it kind of around, like 1 in the center and 3 around the center here. Okay, that's our form flower. See, it's already got a pretty nice arrangement. For my accent flower, I've chosen white spray roses and an apricot peach color stalk. Okay, I'm going to add in these spray roses. I'm adding 5 stems of spray roses in here. Okay, now we're done with that. I'm going to go ahead and add the stalk. I like stalk because it comes in so many different colors, and I do like that little green tip to give you a little bit of a different texture. So I've added 1 in the center. I'm going to add some to the perimeter. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're all done with our centerpiece. It looks pretty nice. It's not a superly high style design by any means, but because the materials and colors are really beautiful, I think this is a gorgeous centerpiece. And it would be beautiful for weddings or showers or an event. And you could, of course, do variations of different kinds of flowers. It doesn't have to be roses all the time. Now, tip number 4 is definitely do a prototype like we just did. That way you can calculate how many stems of flowers you need of each material. Now, we did 6 stems of roses, 5 stems of spray roses, 6 stems of stalk, 3 stems of hydrangeas, and some greenery. And that will help you in shopping, because if you're going to do 25 centerpieces, you're going to be overwhelmed when you go to the flower market or when you go to order, how many bunches of what do I need to order? So that you can just multiply by the number of centerpieces you're going to do and divide by how many stems come in a bunch. So for instance, roses come, just say 10 to a bunch. Wholesale, they come 25 to a bunch. You can just divide that and figure out how many bunches of roses you need, how many bunches of stalk you need, how many bunches of hydrangeas, spray roses, etc., etc. It makes it so much easier. And always order a little bit over. I would say maybe even 10% over. The extra flowers you can use for other things, throw together a little arrangement for the bathroom, whatever. But not every stem is going to be perfect, and you might have breakage. A stem of a rose could fall off, whatever. You don't want to be like calculating it to the last stem. So have a little extra, maybe even like a 5 to 10% overage. And if none breaks, great. You've got extra flowers to decorate somewhere else. And doing a prototype will give you also a very realistic assessment of how long and how difficult it is to make that arrangement. Okay. And tip number 5, definitely do this in an assembly line fashion. What we do is, well, I'll prep all the containers, soak all the foam, cut all the tea leaf wrap, do all that so you're not doing it one, do the tea leaf wrap, do the foam, do the arrangement, and go on to the next one. It is so much faster to do it in an assembly line. And the assembly line kind of goes like this. You first prep your containers, soak the foam, prep the containers, and then you add in your large vase filler flower like the hydrangea and greenery, and then you add in your form flowers, okay? And accent flowers last. Because accent flowers are kind of to fill in between the big flowers and also to give your arrangement some dimension and movement. And number 6, project management. This may be the most important part of my 6 tips. Project management is when you're working with flowers, fresh flowers, you don't have all week, all month to do it. So what we usually do is if I know I have a big event coming up on the weekend, on Monday or Tuesday, I would already be prepping all the containers because those are not going to spoil, right? You could soak foam, put the foam in and all that days before. I do that before I even go to the flower market. And then once you buy your flowers, process all your flowers into separate buckets, one type of flower per bucket with the right preservatives and processing. And let it sit for a day before you arrange. Your roses, if they come really tight, you might have to wait a couple of days for it to open before you can arrange it in your centerpieces. The reason I say that is usually once I've done the centerpiece, I'll put it in the refrigerator. So this is another reason why the prototype is really key, because then you can figure out how long things last and time it perfectly. Okay? Because you want it to be full blooming and perfect for the day of your event and not super tight or spoiling by the time the event comes around. Okay? So the project management aspect is really important. And as a rule of thumb, do not do an arrangement more than 1 or at max 2 days before the event if you don't have refrigeration. Now I have walk-in refrigeration and we do this professionally, so I could do these centerpieces maybe 3-4 days before the event, have it all arranged and put it in the fridge. But if you don't have refrigeration, then you want to do this only the day before or 2 days before. And that's what makes it so tricky. If it's your wedding and you're the bride, do you want to be making this the day before your wedding, right? So recruit help from friends and family, but not too much help because you don't want to turn into a big party and then you're stressed because everybody wants just to have fun and you need to get 30 centerpieces done. Okay, so make sure you get competent help, not help that just wants to come play, if you know what I mean. Okay, so those are my 6 pro tips on how to do your own wedding centerpiece. I hope that helps. I really want to give you the realistic lowdown on how hard or easy it is to do your own centerpieces. Finally, let's see how much money you can save doing this, okay? So I kind of calculated a little bit of how much of each thing I used and how much they were. So the roses were $9 for roses, $6 of hydrangeas, spray roses, $4. So about $4 worth of stock, $23 worth of flowers. And then greenery I cut from my garden, but just kind of calculate about $1 to $2 worth of greenery. And don't forget the cost of your vase. Now these are just really standard vases. They cost about $4 to $5 each. And then there's a third piece of floral foam and just a small piece of that tea leaf wrap. So all in, I would say maybe for this arrangement, maybe $6 for mechanics in vase, $6, $7 for mechanics in vase. So we're at about $30 for this arrangement. Okay, and this would retail, at least I would probably charge about $70, $75 for an arrangement like this with these kinds of roses. Okay, so you're going to save about half, and so you have to really think if it's worth the effort or not. And the prices I'm giving you, that's the prices I paid for these flowers. It will really depend on how much you pay for the flowers. You could probably get roses less expensive at maybe Costco and places like that. And the other thing is you have to really know where you can order roses ahead. I just did one arrangement so I could just pick what I want from Trader Joe's. But if you're going to do 30 arrangements, 25 arrangements, you're going to have to figure out how many dozens of roses in a certain color you need and order that ahead of time. Really, really critical. Okay? So those are all the complexities of doing your own arrangement. So really think about whether or not the effort is worth the savings. I hope this video has helped you in gauging realistically how and if you should do your own centerpieces. So I hope you had fun and learned something in this video. And for those of you who are still brave enough to try your own centerpieces, I hope this tutorial has helped you. As always, please like and subscribe and leave me a comment and let me know if you're going to do this. And I will see you in my next video.